Hey everybody, it's Tao at the Forge again, and I am back today giving you some deck ideas for how to win FNM at home. So this week we have FNM at home Pauper. Now this is Standard Pauper, right? So it's not that you can't use all the historic cards that you've ever had. So if you take a look here, it says this week, Pauper, where your 60 card standard decks are limited to commons and basic lands. So you cannot have you can't have any other decks there. Now, it's kind of weird that it says you can only have basic lands, because usually in Pauper, that still means you can have non-basic lands that are commons. So I'm wondering if they mean that the common basic land or common and non-basic lands are included as well. Right. So, anyways, it'll be interesting to see. But I have some deck ideas that I want to share with you guys, and then you guys can take a look at it and see if if you like it. And if I have some non-basics, but if they're basics only, then that's easy to modify as well. Right. So, anyways, and you can receive a code for Arena promo pack. Basically, you just have to take a screenshot of this screen once you've started and send this to your LGS through from mine. I just posted through Facebook, and then they'll send you like a card style or something like that. So I'd encourage you guys to go and play this. It's free to go in, and for once you got something to do with like all the millions of like wild cards that you'll have for this. So I got like 218 common wild cards. So it gives you something to do with those things anyways. So anyways, let's get started. So originally I thought of these 5 decks, but then I realized that Pauper Mill won't work because it's basically just my Persistent Petitioners deck, and Persistent Petitioners is banned in this event. So this is a no-go for this one, unfortunately. I think that they probably made the right decision for this because this is actually a very powerful deck, and it's because they've got such a big body and they can just like last for so long in Pauper, like especially at Standard Pauper, this one's really rough. It's really hard to deal with. So yeah, I can kind of see why they would say no to this Pauper Mill one. Okay, so the other ones I have, these two here, Pauper Dimir Enchantments and Pauper Dimir Control. These ones are kind of along the same lines, and then we got Red Rush and Stompy. So let's go over these two first, because they're kind of along the same. I had kind of similar ideas. Now, the thing with Pauper, especially Standard Pauper, is that it's actually really hard to brew with it, because there's just such a small card pool for it that it's not really that you can be super creative or whatever. Like, there's just some cards that are I don't know. It's not the same as like what you'd call historic Pauper, where you can use cards from all over Magic's history, right? Yeah, Standard Pauper is a lot tougher to do, but there's some other considerations. Is that one is that Pauper in general is a much slower format, and it doesn't generally have giant creatures. Okay, so but it is still mainly a creature-based strategy, so you're not going to see things like Approach of the Second Sun or Azorius Elocutors or whatever like that, like where they have like alternate win conditions. Right, there's sometimes you can have mill decks and things like that, but those are generally not in Standard Pauper. Okay, so we got Pauper Enchantments. Let's take a look at this. Alright, so basically the strategy behind this is that we want to tie up the board with a whole crap ton of enchantments. And the reason why we want to do that is so that we can eventually get this Brine Giant out. Right, so Brine Giant is a 5/6 for 7, but here's the thing, like, so for 7 mana it's really rough, but it costs 1 less for each enchantment you control. So what we want to do is we want to hit a whole bunch of enchantments and basically use those enchantments to tie up the board. So we want them to stick around. Okay, as an alternate win thing or threat for our opponent, we have Nyxborn Marauder, right, which is just a 4 mana 4/3, so it's just a good beater, but it is an enchantment as well. So an Nyxborn Marauder can help us to cast our Brine Giant, right? So that's why it's on there. All right, the rest of them, there are some better removal spells, but they're not enchantments, and so I don't want to include them necessarily. Okay, so we got basically things like card draw and things to tie up the board. So we got Opt, so you can scry 1, draw a card. Dead Weight is an enchantment just to give a creature -2/-2. Now, what you might have to do though is give it to like a creature that like, I guess you could just kill a creature that could potentially be problematic later, so kill it early. But you could also just put it on, like, say, a 3/3, make it into a 1/1, and then you have an enchantment sitting on the battlefield to bring your Brine Giant down. Right? Essence Scatter is just for some control. Like, mainly the problems that we're going to have is going to be target creatures. Now, Essence Scatter could be okay. I might actually substitute this for 2 negates. So 2 Essence Scatter, 2 negates, because we got a lot of other ways to deal with creatures that are already on the board. But negate might help us to protect our own creatures once they're down, because we don't have too many of them. So it could actually be a good choice to substitute 2 Essence Scatter with 2 negate. Okay, 2 Omen of the Sea. Again, just more enchantments that helps us to scry and draw cards. Starlit Mantle is important because it has flash. All right, so what you can do is you can flash it onto one of your creatures. So if you've got, like, one of our few threats down, our Nyxborn Marauder or Brine Giant, and your opponent tries to remove it, you can Starlit Mantle it, and then you can use that to protect your creature because it gives you hexproof until end of turn, and then it also makes it bigger, and it's also an enchantment that can help you cast your Brine Giant later. Okay, Myra's Grasp is another aura enchantment, very similar to Dead Weight, except instead of -2/-2, it gives the creature -3/-3. That's actually really strong. And remember, you can put multiple of these on creatures as well. Okay, Temple Thief. Temple Thief is, again, one of our small threats. It's an early game threat that we can try and get down, but it can't be blocked by enchanted creatures or enchantment creatures. So what we're ideally going to do is, if you have, like, a Myra's Grasp or a Dead Weight, you can put that on a creature, make it, like, say, a 3/3 into a 1/1, right? Then you can still use Temple Thief, or let's say it's a 5/5, you can put, like, Myra's Grasp on it, make it a 2/2, but then it can't block Temple Thief, and then we can just keep on pummeling our opponent with Temple Thief, right? And ideally, we could even put a Starlit Mantle on it, make him into a 3/3, and then we could just keep going from there. Okay, then other things we have are Charmed Sleep. Okay, so it just taps the target creature, and that creature just doesn't untap during its untap step. We have 3 Thirst for Meaning, so just draw 3 cards, and then discard 2, unless you discard an enchantment. But we've got so many enchantments, it should be fairly easy to do that. Right, and then after that, we've got our threats, our game-winning threats, which is going to be the Nyxborn Marauder and the Brine Giant, right? And then after that, we've got 7 islands, 7 swamps, and 4 guild gates and 4 dismal backwaters. Now, if you are not allowed to use the guild gates and the backwater, then I would just substitute 4 islands, 4 swamps. So just go 11/11, and that should be good. Okay, so along those same lines, we have Pauper, Dimir, Mill, our control. So it's basically the same type of setup, except this one we can take advantage of. Our win condition is a little bit different. We don't necessarily have to have so many enchantments, right? So our win condition is to try and get down an ill-gotten inheritance, right? And just, like, stall the game out, try and get as many of these as possible, right? So it just says at the beginning of your upkeep, ill-gotten inheritance deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain 1 life. Right, so you're just trying to get this down, and then at the end you can pay 6 mana and sacrifice it, and just deals 4 damage to target opponent. You can activate this at any time, right? So I mean, it's a tough win condition, but what we want to do is just stall the board, right? So to make things, like, as hard as possible for our opponent to deal with their, like, or get rid of all their threats over and over again, so they can't pummel us while we have this out. All right, so what we are going to do is we are looking for things like Opt, again, to just dig, all right, to look for, like, give us some extra card draw, help in our deck. 4 Duress, so to take away things that could actually take away our Ill-Gotten Inheritance or remove some early game threats from our opponent. Right, now that's, of course, non-creature threats, okay, but like, maybe they have counter spells or whatever that you want to get rid of. Essence Scatter, again, just to get rat of any creatures that are coming down onto the board. Omen of the Sea, again, is just a way to dig for more cards and get the cards that you want. Burglar Rat, to, again, just disrupt your opponent's hand. And it also, it's a 1/1 1/1 body on the field just to help you chump block later, right? Myra's Grasp, again, just to put an enchantment on a creature, right? And you can then, either kill the creature or at least take it down so that you can, it's not like a 5/5. You only instead of taking 5 a turn, you can just take 2. Murder, so just flat out just kill a creature. Obnixilus's Cruelty. Okay, this is actually a really cool card. It's a lot more powerful than people think because it exiles the creature, so it doesn't put it in the graveyard. But also, -5/-5 is pretty significant. There's not a lot of threats in Pauper, especially that are more than 5 toughness. Okay, Farika's Libation. Now, this one is one that I think a lot of people don't really consider, but it's instant speed, and the thing is, it dodges hexproof. So what happens is if your opponent has a hexproof creature, right? So even if they put like a Starlit Mantle or something on their creature, then it doesn't matter because you're getting your opponent to sacrifice it. It also gets around indestructible as well because it's not destroying a creature; it's just giving them, it's causing your opponent to sacrifice it. Now I'm not sure if there's any indestructible creatures in Pauper, Standard Pauper, anyways, but nonetheless, this can be done at instant speed, and it's one of the few things. And this is something that a lot of people forget, is that black rarely ever has any enchantment removal at all, right? So this is one way that you can get rid of your opponent's enchantments, right? So if they happen to have an ill-gotten inheritance against you, you can use Farika's Libation to get rid of it. Okay, same thing with Obnixilis' Cruelty, just I should mention, is it also dodges indestructible as well, because it doesn't say destroy a creature, it just says it gets -5/-5. So if the creature was indestructible, then it still gets this -5/-5 and can still die. Okay, and then basically the land package is very similar. In this one, I've got a lot more black here because mainly like the blues are only just 1 cost, and we've got like a lot of 2-cost black, right? So, but again, if you're not able to use Guild Gates and Backwater, which I don't see that happening, but then you could just also substitute in like islands and swamps, so 4 islands, 4 swamps, and it would be fine. Okay, Red Rush. Now, Red Rush is actually just very similar to what we had before, like the normal Red Rush, and I suspect that you're going to see a lot of this deck. Okay, so we got 4 Grim Initiates, which is tough to deal with. The first strike, Infuriate, right? So giving your creatures +3/+2 till end of turn. Scorch Spitters, again, just to get some extra damage. Shocks, which can be removal and also just punishing your opponent. Gingerbrute, again, you can make them unblockable. Fire Prophecy. Now, Fire Prophecy can get rid of a target creature, but it also can help you cycle a card. So you can discard that extra land that you draw and draw into something more useful if you need. Omen the Forge is basically just a more expensive shock, but allows you to scry later on in the game if you really need to. Rimrock Knight. Okay, so again, just a great all-around versatile card. You can pump your creature, get a little bit extra damage, and then becomes a 3/1 beater. So the idea of this, obviously, is that we're going to try and come out hard and fast against our opponent. Skewer the Critics. Okay, so just 3 damage. You should be able to get 1 damage through to, like, if you have a Gingerbrute, you can make him unblockable, attack, right? And then you can use Skewer the Critic to get 3 more. Okay, and that's to any target as well. So basically, it's like a lightning bolt. All right, Iroha's Blessing. Okay, so Iroha's Blessing enters the battlefield, deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. There's no common planeswalkers that I know of. Anyways, then basically this is a creature removal, but the thing is it also gives your creature a +1/+1. So if your opponent does manage to get something down with 4 toughness, then you can actually just like use this and kill it, right? And then 1 Dwarven Mine basically is just to create, just on the odd chance that you get this out later on, you could actually just get a dwarf out of it. I threw this in here, but it's not a must-have. The thing is, we want to be fast, right? So we want to have fast mana. So this would be a kind of a feel-bad card if you got this, like if you had to cast this first turn, right? So like that's why there's only 1 of them in there. Otherwise, it'd be cool to have like a whole bunch of them, but but yeah, it's not really cool to have slow mana in Red Rush. Okay, and then after that, just 20 mountains. There's only 21 cards here, mainly because Red Rush is just meant to be so fast. Like, so you can see like most of our curve is like in the 1 mana slot here. So anyways, so Red Rush, should be a fairly good one for you to be able to get there. Okay, so I suspect you're going to see a variation of this, quite a bit. Okay, and then Pauper Stompy. Okay, so basically what Pauper Stompy is just big green creatures, All right, so we got Adventurous Impulse, which is a way for you to either find creatures or lands, and basically to kind of help you ramp a little more. It's not really ramp because you're not really getting like huge creatures right away. Right, you're not like doubling mana or adding extra mana, but it's a way to first thin your deck, but then also a way to make sure you always have land cards in your hand, right? So you can get to these, to these bigger threats later on. Okay, now an important part here is the Moss Viper and the Sedge Scorpion, right? Both of them are 1/1s with Death Touch, but basically it's gonna slow up the board. It's gonna make it really hard for your opponent to attack into you, right? It's gonna be rough because they generally don't want to spend like their removal on a stupid 1/1, right? But in the meantime, you got this 1/1 holding up the board. You can attack with it early game. So like on your first turn, you could put like a forest, a forest down, and then Moss Viper, right? And then turn 2, you can start swinging one at a time. Our real threats though are here: Migratory Greathorn, and if you get this down, you can mutate one of your Death Touch creatures, and it still retains the Death Touch. It gives you a little bit of land so you can look for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped. So you can make a 3/4 Death Toucher out of this. And then later on, we got Voracious Typhon. Now this one's going to be important. Mainly because you can escape with it. So it's a 4/4, but when it escapes, right, and it's only 7 to escape, we should be able to get there. Then it becomes a 7/7, right? So and you can keep escaping with it over and over again too. So that's really good. Okay, after that we have Silverback Shaman, and Silverback Shaman's a 5/4 and with Trample, which is in Pauper a fairly large creature, but when it dies, you also draw a card, so then it replaces itself if it dies. Right, so I mean, overall, those are pretty good threats to have. Now, here's our removal package. So we don't really have much to protect ourselves against like spell removals, right? But there's, I guess there are some spell type removals, but there's nothing we can really do about that. And then those things can later on feed our Voracious Typhon if they really need to. Okay, but for creature removal, we have Rabid Bite. So target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. Basically, they're all variations of this. Ram Through. So target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. And then if it has Trample, the excess is dealt to the controller. And Band Together. Okay, so 2 target creatures you control each deal damage equal to their power to another target creature. Now here's the thing, they don't fight. Right? So normally when you have a fight card, both creatures deal damage to each other, but these are one-way fights. So they're just dealing damage to another creature equal to their power. Right? So so it's important to understand, if you fight with a Sedge Scorpion, right, you would lose a Sedge Scorpion because the other creature is going to respond with its own damage, right? Unless it's a 0 power creature. Right? But a Sedge Scorpion, for instance, if you use Rabid Bite, right, and you have like Sedge Scorpion versus like a Silverback Shaman, right? The Silverback Shaman will take 1 damage from the Sedge Scorpion, but the Sedge Scorpion won't die. But because the Sedge Scorpion or the Moss Viper has Death Touch and deals it damage, then it just automatically kills that creature. Right, so these things combined with one of your 1/1 Death Touchers end up making basically an instant kill spell. Right, so that's why I have so many of these in there. And your 1 Sedge Scorpion, right, can turn into can actually just like if you have 4 mana, for instance, you could cast this one twice, right, and you could just get your Sedge Scorpion to kill all your opponent's creatures. Right, I think this is actually a pretty powerful ability to use, and that's why there's 12 pieces of removal here. Right, it basically forces your opponent to use removal on these like little Death Touchers, and you've got 8 of them, so there's a good chance that you're going to see at least 2 or 3 of them in the match. Right, and then Adventurous Impulse can help you to get more of them if you need. It can also help get land if you want early game, or help you find like these guys later on if you really need. After that, it's just 24 forests, and that's the way it plays. So that's the whole deck. So anyways, let me know in the comments what you think. Are you excited to play Pauper in Standard? And also, after, if you do try these decks and they, you have success or not success, let me know in the comments, and let me know, like, did it work, did it not work? One of the problems with actually building decks like this in Arena, especially with Standard Pauper, is there's not really any way to test it, right? Because like if you go to MTGO and try and build these, they don't have. I don't think they have Standard Pauper, right? And plus, I don't play MTGO anymore. But it's really tough to test because there's not really anywhere to actually to test them. So it's kind of rough. These are my ideas of decks that could work. I also had tried to put together some other decks. You can see down here. Let's see, Pauper Dimir Flash. I might still try and do something like that. But I already figured I had a lot of Dimir ones. This is an old Rat Colony Pauper deck. But I also thought of a Turbo Fog deck because there's actually a lot of good fog effects. But the problem is there's no wind conditions behind it. So, it's actually really kind of rough to try and build a Turbo Fog without an alternate wind condition. So, anyways, those are the decks. Let me know what you think in the comments. And, thanks for subscribing. Remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next video.